the thing that I love about Book, and the reason it really interested me in just like Web3 technology and blockchain and crypto, is the elevator pitch is so easy. I mean, you do this on the ski lift all the time, but it's a pitch for like blockchain and digital ownership that I can give to my mom, and she understands it.
Hello everyone, and may the 4th be with you. I am here at Book.io headquarters, just 3.5 hours north of the Consensus Conference that was in Austin last week. I've had the chance to hang out with the team here all week, and while I was here, I thought it would be a good opportunity to sit down with RJ, Book.io CTO, and talk all things tech and all things book. It was a great conversation, and I really think you're going to enjoy it. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Woodland Pools. We've got the book dev here with us. So RJ from Book.io has taken the time to sit down and chat with us today. So RJ, thanks a lot for coming on the channel.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's interesting talking in a little bit more of a formal setting here, because we're just used to like either just slacking each other memes or kind of just
exactly
or just kind of like talking over each other's shoulders. We sit like kind of like sort of back to back in the office when I'm in town. But so I was just coming off of Consensus, and I'm in the office this week, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to just like have a chat about, I don't know, a little bit about like Book and yourself and kind of whatever. I know that like a lot of the OGs that are in the community, are really a fan of the book dev and like the stuff that you work on and like stuff like that. And I think it might be kind of cool to kind of go through some of those things. So
I mean, I'm going to set expectations now. You're going to be sorely disappointed. I'm not interesting. I'm just a dude sitting behind a laptop writing code.
Yes,
that's what I do.
And I think a big part of your humble nature is what a lot of us appreciate about you. So and I will say to counterbalance that, for those of you that don't know, RJ is probably one of the best developers I've ever worked with. So it's
that means a lot. Thank you.
But anyway, so cool. So I guess I joined the team about like 2 months ago. And we actually first met each other. I want to say like last November. I was doing a road trip down to Austin. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of just like pass by and meet you guys. And that was actually the first time that I ever saw past the Dino avatar. I was kind of like, I walked in and all these new faces, and you're like, oh, I'm RJ. I'm like, oh, great. I didn't even know you were going to be here. But so maybe tell us a little about like your background, kind of like, I know that you've like been a big fan of Haskell for a long time, but I'll leave it sort of open-ended, like what, sort of your background and kind of what you did before Book.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I started programming actually kind of on accident as a sophomore in high school. I had to pick another elective, and I was like, computer science, that sounds cool. And so I took that class and just completely fell in love with it. Have been in love with just learning different languages, problem solving, and all of that ever since then. So I grew up fairly poor, but I remember asking for Christmas and birthday a new programming language book for every one of those things. Like that was so cool. That was the only time we didn't have any books, like computer science books in our library nearby, and so I would ask like for Christmas, there was this Java game programming book was the first one that I wanted. And so I learned how to make games in Java, and then I went and learned C, and then really got into PHP for web development for a while. And so just every birthday and Christmas would get a new language. And I just loved not only learning how to program, but how like all these different languages, you could attack problems from different angles. And every language had something cool and new to offer. And so ever since then, I mean, I've just been in love with programming, and I got an internship at EDS, which is now owned by HP, out of high school. So my uncle was working there, and I got an internship there. Worked there through the summer, so the summer after my senior year of high school. And then I remember the week before I was supposed to start college, my boss pulled me in and said, hey, how about if you keep doing what you're doing, we'll give you a laptop, we'll pay you at the time what was like 4 or 5 times the rate that I would make like minimum wage. I was like, this is incredible. And you just keep working throughout the year. You don't have to come into the office or anything. Like and at this time, this was 2007. And so that was fairly unheard of. Like remote work wasn't really a thing. And I was like, well, I don't really have a laptop. Like, oh yeah, here, have a laptop. Work when you can, bill us the hours, and so I did that all through college. And
That's amazing.
It was incredible. It was a huge blessing to be able to get to do that. I learned more from that time, like interning and solving actual business problems, than I did from actually any of my computer science classes in school.
Totally.
And so, that was just. That really like set me off on the path. And I also came across a really good mentor. His name was Randy Mears there, who at one point I wanted to drop out of college because I was like, I'm not learning anything here. Like I really love programming. I just want to do this. And he encouraged me. He was like, no, just keep your head down, like get your bachelor's degree and then you can go. He's like, it's something you'll regret for the rest of your life if you don't just do it now, just finish
to have it. Yeah.
And so, so I did. I ended up finishing. I graduated there, and I went to work for a really small startup, writing. It was like a social media startup that was all written in PHP.
Okay.
And I'd used that all through college. I was like, this is the best programming language. Like, I want to.
Doesn't get any better.
Exactly.
Than this.
I want a job writing PHP.
Yeah.
And so I went and found one, and it was awesome. But it was also startup life. I've got a wife and 3 kids, and at the time I had a wife and my daughter had just been born. And in typical startup fashion, I was working 80, 90 hours a week, not really going home.
Right.
And so about 8 months in, I decided, like, I can't do this startup thing. And so decided to swing the pendulum the other way and went corporate life. And so I went to work for SunGard Higher Education, writing continuing education software, and mostly like scheduling, so building calendars and stuff. And at the time, I was really getting into animation, and I had learned ActionScript 3, which is kind of like the programming language behind Flash.
Okay.
And so I was like, this is a theme throughout my entire career, is I choose a job based on what language I get to write.
Oh, okay,
and
sure.
So
yeah, fair enough.
I was like, I'm done writing PHP. It's time to go learn, or time to write ActionScript and get paid for it. And so went and found this job that was using Flex at the time. I don't even know if you remember that. It's a framework that was kind of built on Flash, but it built out like all these UI components. And it was a way to get a level of interactivity that you couldn't get out of HTML.
Okay.
So went and did that for a few years.
Well, Flash, when it first it was just mind blowing.
Oh yeah,
right? Like just like
exactly.
the
you can do this over the web.
Yeah, exactly. Like games in Flash when they first came out were just blew your mind.
Yeah.
So in terms of the interactivity and just like how like crisp the graphics and things looked and how reactive and responsive they were. Yeah,
this was a really cool project because we were taking all of that interactivity with a calendar, which at the time Google Calendar had just come out, and it was pretty plain, but our calendar had a lot of like interactivity. So you could search for a class. So I need to take, I don't know, English 101 or whatever. And you search and it would pull up English 101, and then you could drag it onto your calendar and it would like blow out all of the different. So if it was like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, it would show a little like time slot on Monday, Wednesday, Friday while you're hovering it, and you can see if it fits on your schedule or not.
Oh.
And then you could let it go if you did. And it's like, okay, now it kind of adds it to your schedule. But yeah, so that was really cool. And then I decided that I wanted to be a mobile developer. Okay. So went and learned Objective-C and applied and got a job at a little advertising agency making mobile apps. So I built Walmart's mobile app and Sam's Club. I worked on the team
I did not know that.
built all that.
That's amazing.
So that was really cool. I really enjoyed mobile development. And then I don't know. I've done that throughout my. I'm not going to go through my whole career.
Sure,
it's going to take forever.
But wow.
Yeah, it just kind of. Every job that I've gone to has been in a new programming language, and that's something
so
that
cool.
I love learning, and I love being challenged.
Yeah.
And so kind of fast forward to where we are now. I came across Haskell maybe 10 years ago and started playing with it and just completely fell in love with it because it stumped me like no other language ever had before. At the time that
I started,
do that. Yeah.
It'll do that when you're first learning
I had been writing code for like 10 or 12 years, and I was like, man, this like I'm a decent coder now.
Yeah.
And then I picked up Haskell and I was like, I literally cannot do anything other than like put string line and have it like output my name. Like if I have to iterate over something, I don't know how to do that. I can't do even the most basic of things.
Well, when you first encounter a purely functional language, and you realize that there's no ability to loop, like no easy ability to loop, and that everything has to be recursion. That in itself is just immediate mind bend. It just kind of like
and this idea of passing functions around as arguments, like their first class values, and just all of the functional paradigms now that I absolutely love and can't imagine programming without. But at the time, coming at it from just a completely imperative worldview, I was like, I have to learn how to use this. And fell in love with Haskell and just functional programming in general, which is actually kind of when Ben, he called me in, I guess it was like December of 2021. It's like, hey, we're thinking about doing this startup. It's called Book. It's on, we're going to put books on blockchain, which I thought was pretty interesting. And he was like, and we're going to target Cardano as the blockchain that we build this on. And so I had never heard of Cardano. And so I went and did some research. I was like, wait, Cardano's like written in Haskell. I could actually like get paid to write Haskell at some point. So this is sweet. So to be fair, it was kind of half between the, because I absolutely believe in the vision and the idea of decentralized knowledge.
Right.
But it was kind of that plus getting to write like Haskell and get paid for it. I was like, all right, I'm in.
That's
and
so cool.
Yeah, took the plunge and started full-time in March of 2022 on Book. At the time, so that was...
So it's just now been a year.
Just now been a year.
Wow.
I had never owned an NFT, had no clue what Cardano was.
Wow.
They were talking about doing like an initial coin offering at the time.
Right.
And so I'm like, all right, I need to learn like first off how all these coins work, like what's a wallet. Like
wow.
I knew at this time last year almost nothing. And
wow.
Yeah, it's so that's one thing that I have just loved about this job, other than like the incredible community and support that we've had, is getting to learn everything. It's been fantastic.
Man, and yeah, and well, so now that like that makes sense now. It's like why, like for example, I remember like when we kind of had like a thread going on Twitter, and like Adam Dean responded at one point. He was like, yeah, well, oh yeah, because I was kind of like, somebody said something, and I was kind of like in my head I just thought about like all of these like hyper intelligent people that are really really capable, like that are all like in this ecosystem, and just how like amazing it is to like just, you know, to be able to like run into these people and share ideas with them and whatever else. Right. And then you in like your humble way were kind of like, oh well, I'm just, you know, it's like the Oscar nominations, like I'm just like, you know, I'm just happy to be nominated kind of thing, right? And then like Adam Dean responded and he was like, yeah, well, look at all of us on this list here and like name one other person that has taken their project on at the time 3 different chains, now 4.
Yeah.
And so it's funny like when you go through like that whole background, like now it kind of makes sense how you're just like, how that's almost like I feel like something that you'd be drawn to anyways, where it's like at this point, you know, like coding on just Cardano is probably just getting boring, and you're like, oh well, how can we like check out, you know, Ethereum and Poly and Algorand and so but that's cool, man. That's really interesting.
I appreciate it, and I do still feel completely like out of place next to those names. Like I just don't I feel like an imposter. I mean, honestly, but it's the community's been so welcoming and helpful. I mean, Adam's actually a great example. Like he had asked a couple questions, replied back on Twitter, and then I had hit him up about some questions about the way that we do our airdrop, and he gave me some great advice, and I still use exactly what he told me. He like said, you know, you can chain transactions together and submit into the blockchain, and I mean that's exactly how our airdrop system that's called Stork, which is one of my other favorite things, is naming things.
Oh sure.
So Stork is our airdrop utility, and it's all based on some suggestions that Adam gave me.
That's cool. Nice, man. That's awesome. And so it's interesting. I also wanted to just like point out too that like for anybody who is like in the process of learning like Haskell and Plutus and like is like feeling like, oh man, like this is like really hard. Like I do appreciate that like that you were drawn to it because of how challenging you found it.
100%.
So that's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand it's like, oh, you know, it's a cool intellectual problem, but then there is the very real thing of like, okay, but not every developer is going to find that challenging and not discouraging.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where like, you know, we've been talking a lot, like as a broader community, we've all been talking a lot about like having other ways to be able to write Cardano smart contracts, and like it's nice seeing these different libraries come out. And like we've actually, you and I have been talking quite a bit lately about Aiken, and how we have both like recently fallen in love with Rust as a language.
I know. I think I told you like don't tell Haskell, but I think that Rust may now be my new favorite programming language.
That's awesome.
It's amazing. But and I think that's really important for the Cardano ecosystem to have different options when it comes to writing smart contracts. I mean, like Aiken is a really, really good example. Like, not everyone wants to go set up a Nix environment so that they can get the Plutus playground set up and all of that. And so Aiken is like a very real contender there. That makes it just lowers the bar massively, or the barrier to entry to get into writing smart contracts. So
well, what I think is cool about that too is that like the people working on that, and so this for even those like in the community that are not developers, like why this is interesting, I think, is because like what's cool about that also is that the people that are working on Aiken, like Matthias at K-Torz, right? So like he is like a Haskell pro. And now he's like writing like this thing to make it like so, because I think what's cool about that is like even though they take a lot of things from Haskell and from Rust into it, what's interesting I think about it is that like making this purpose-built language that compiles down to Plutus core from somebody that knows Plutus core very, very deeply. So then you can kind of like, you know, when you have that level of deep understanding, it's like, okay, now what abstractions do we do above it that can make it just like, okay, this is all you need to know, and then since I'm an expert in like this lower level part, I'll take care of the abstractions for you to go down.
And there's a massive advantage in that, so you don't end up with like some of these leaky abstractions if you didn't understand the underlying core as well as he does.
Well, I could talk to you about languages and stuff like for like a while.
So
we'll stop there, I think, because like now like we're like maybe like 15 minutes in, and like some people are like, okay, when are you gonna talk about books? Right. So like, so for all the nerds in the audience, like that was really fun. But like, so now, so let's talk about levels of abstraction. Let's go a few levels back up, and talk about like so let's talk about book a little bit. Maybe how about this? Because like I know there's some people that are watching this who came to watch this because they know you or of you and they know about book and whatever else. But there's also people like on the channel that have been like following the channel for a while that maybe have like not heard about book at all. Mm-hmm. And so I mention it, but like so maybe give like your take on like what Book.io is. Yeah. Let's just start there. Like, what is it, and what do you think is like the value proposition of what makes it interesting?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I love about Book and the reason it really interested me in just like Web3 technology and blockchain and crypto is the elevator pitch is so easy. Yeah. I mean, you do this on the ski lift all the time, but it's a pitch for like blockchain and digital ownership that I can give to my mom and she understands it. Yeah. So it's really easy to set up the problem of with something like Kindle or Barnes & Noble, the books that you buy there, you're just buying a license. You don't actually own those books. So when you're done reading them, you can't turn around and sell them. At any time, the publisher, the author, Barnes & Noble, Amazon could revoke it from you. Mm-hmm. And so the idea with Book is actually just to bring a lot of what the benefits of the physical world into digital ownership. And so when you buy a book, you should own that book. You should be able to do whatever the heck you want with it. I should be able to send it to you when I'm done reading it. That's something that really struck me when my wife listened to an audiobook on Audible. Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh man, you should really listen to this. And I was like, well, I have to go buy it.
You have to go buy the same,
Even though she already bought it, or I can log in with her credentials, but that's not scalable.
Well, and the other thing too is that like with her, like so, not only is it that like you can't get a copy of it, but also she's not going to listen to it again. Yep. So now it's just basically just taking up room on her shelf of like a book that like she's never going to even open again. Yep. So that's one thing that always bothered me. But like, anyway, sorry, go ahead. But like that's like like a piece that like just scratches the back of my brain where it's just like I almost want a way to hide those, and you want a way to get it, and there's no way to make this transfer happen. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And again, I go back to the fact that she paid good money for that asset, and she can't do it. She can't give it to me, so she does not own it. Mm-hmm. And so that's, to me, that's the sort of the elevator pitch for Book. But then even a level higher, just the vision of having books that cannot be banned, that cannot be burned, that can't be taken from you by any higher authority. So we're not quite there yet with Book, but we're getting there, and that is the end goal. And then you take that with books and then expand that out into everything else. So some of your viewers may know that we also own Stuff.io. Oh yeah. And so that we're going to start trying to do like audio video things with Stuff.io, and it's taking the exact same concept of DEAs with books and moving it to audio, video, to audio books, to blueprints, legal documents. I mean, anything that you need to own and prove ownership that you own in a digital fashion. Right. We could use that for a DEA. So
yeah, and I like too that sort of abstraction of like literally just calling it like a decentralized encrypted asset. Yep. And that it's not like a decentralized encrypted book. It's any kind of digital asset that is, and all three of those words I think are important, right? Where it's decentralized. There's no central authority that has like ownership of it. Yep. It's encrypted, and this is like when I first heard about Book, the first question that I had was like, because if you think about any other NFTs or even any of the notion of a public blockchain, it's like okay, I can go to anyone's wallet and view the NFTs that they have, right? Yep. And so it's like, okay, well, if it's going to be a book, then what keeps me from just going to anyone's wallet and just reading the book that they have, right? And so, like, because at that point, the whole model falls apart if anybody could just do that. Yeah. And so, if the only convenience is just that, like, oh, it just shows up in my wallet, but you could still go and find it somewhere else, then it just doesn't really, you don't really own it. Yeah. So that encrypted part is important. Yep. So it's decentralized. It's like no central party can prevent you from getting to it. It's encrypted. So if somebody else goes to like see your wallet, they just see like encrypted gibberish, and then it being a generalized asset where it can be anything. It can be like a book or music or whatever. And
I want to touch a little bit more on that encrypted part also, because there's a lot of argument sometimes about, why do you have to encrypt these assets? And the way that I think about it is from let's use books as a concrete example, and the author who put in time, energy, money, writing and creating this book, this story, that author should be compensated for their work. Just like I get paid to write code, they get paid to write books. And so then when you start freely distributing their books, they don't actually get compensated for the work that they've done. And so that's one of the major benefits of that encrypted part.
Right.
So you have true ownership, yet the author is still protected. Their IP is still protected. And so it's a win-win for both parties there.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it totally makes sense. And so let me think here. So we covered about like what book is and sort of that value proposition. There was a question that I thought of like while you're talking, but I'm sure it'll come back to me. But in the meantime, actually that's what it was. I wanted to point out, because when you were saying that like with book we're not quite there yet in terms of the I think you just broadly stated we're not quite there yet. But I want to clarify for people that like in terms of, that's what it was. 'Cause we were talking about. So you're talking about the elevator pitch. Like you have it, you own it, you can send it.
Yeah.
And so I want to clarify for people that like when we say that we're not there yet, the only part that's really the last remaining piece is just fully decentralizing just the actual reading capability.
That's correct.
And that part will come, and that's on the roadmap. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for people to know that like as of today, especially with the way that Cardano works as a blockchain and the way that how native assets are treated, nearly with an asterisk, nearly identical to ADA.
Right.
That like everything else about the ownership is already in place.
Yeah,
so like
exactly.
when you buy the books and you do whatever else, like you actually have the representative ownership of that book as an NFT in your wallet. The pins on IPFS that correspond to the different chapters are all actually already being hosted, and they're already out there.
Yep.
And so the only piece that's sort of like a thing that we're working on to get to is fully decentralizing the reading process. But the ownership mechanism is already in place.
Yes, and that's exactly right. That's actually, thanks for clarifying that. So I have a marketing minor. That was when I went and got my degree in computer science.
Sure.
I needed a minor, and so I chose marketing. And so I have a love-hate relationship with marketing.
Yeah.
So I do try to make sure that we don't market ourselves as much as I can control outside of what we can actually do.
Right,
so
totally.
The idea of a DEA or a decentralized encrypted asset, that actually is true. That's not just marketing talk.
Yeah.
The asset itself, like you pointed out, is fully decentralized. So it's stored out on IPFS. All of the pins are out there, and I actually have the capability locally that I need to actually just deploy. But at any time, you can pull all of the pins for your assets that make up each of your individual books. And if you wanted to self-host those pins, you could do that as well. Another thing that we're working on is actually moving, having 3 different layers of decentralization with the assets, and actually putting those assets on Arweave as well.
Sure. Yep.
So that, because one of the issues with IPFS is if you lose the pins, then potentially those assets will get garbage collected, and
Right.
they're no longer available. And so right now, Book as a company pays for a pinning service to host all those pins. But outside of being able to self-host your pins, we're also going to put everything on Arweave. And I believe, I need to research this more, but I believe you get 200 years of guaranteed storage.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, and so we're essentially going to have that. That's going to be like our absolute source of truth, is that whatever's out on Arweave. Then IPFS will be sort of that middle layer. It's faster than access to
Right.
Arweave. And then we're going to build a CDN caching layer on top of that, which we've actually already kind of built, but and eventually want to expose that to the public as well if they want to do stuff with our assets. So,
Yeah, that's cool. And then it's interesting too, like the idea of like utilizing different chains, not even just like the chains that you deploy on, but using different chains, different technologies for almost the levels of the stack that you're working with, right? Because Arweave is cool. I know that like I haven't really covered them on the channel, but I know like Project Noom, I was talking to Andrew Westberg, he's their CTO, and I was like chatting with Andrew, and like that's what they're using for to host their music.
Oh, nice.
Is on Arweave.
Yep,
and then
awesome.
I know like I had a conversation about like storage and stuff almost a year ago now with Patrick from Endmaker. And we were talking about like IPFS versus Arweave and stuff like that. So like, so it's really interesting, like the different things and solutions and what they bring.
Yeah.
Cool. So with that, so we kind of covered like what Book is. So let's say like in the interest of time, because we still have a little bit of time left, but I want to make sure. So I'll let you like choose your own adventure, because then we can always like do this again sometime. Yeah. But like, so there's a couple different things like that I think of. Like one of them is. Book has now gone live on 4 different chains: Cardano, Ethereum, Polygon, and Algorand. The last one was the big announcement with the Brave New World giveaway with Algorand. And so that's one piece. And then like the other piece is some of the things that we are looking to add from like a feature set. Like literally you and I were whiteboarding yesterday about how to do like lending and stuff. Yeah, it's going to be so fun. Like that was a lot of fun actually. Just kind of like just going through that. Yeah, it was really cool. And actually too, how to a certain degree, and this is the nice thing about both when you plan ahead from a company standpoint, but then also working with a protocol that's like, can sometimes, it's almost like Haskell in a way, like the Cardano XNUTXO model, where it sometimes feels harder than it has to be, but then when you start thinking in that paradigm, it's just so clean, and everything just works out so nicely. Okay, so those are two different topics. So like, would you rather talk about the different like chains that Cardano has, that book has launched on, and maybe the thoughts on, because I'm just curious too, I haven't really even thought about this, like why one might be more interesting than the other for specific kinds of projects or communities or whatever, or do you want to talk a little bit more about like lending and where that can go or whatever? So that's up to you.
I think lending is more interesting. Sure. So the chains obviously all have their differences, and I have my personal preference that doesn't represent the official book position or anything
opinions
like that.
on your own.
Exactly. The opinions are my own. But at the end of the day, I kind of view blockchain as a tool. And actually, Josh, the CEO, he was telling me that his wife was saying yesterday, she thought that blockchain, there was just one blockchain. So she has a Cardano wallet, but she thought that's just my blockchain wallet. And so this whole concept of like, wait, there's different implementations of blockchain, like that to people that are outside of the space that you and I live in every single day, a lot of them have no clue. I mean, me a year ago, I knew that there were different implementations of blockchains, but it's, to them, it's really an implementation detail. It's like, what programming language is your website written in? It doesn't really matter to them. And then there are like really good benefits of certain chains and things that other chains do really well. But at the end of the day, I kind of view the chain as what gives us the ability to have ownership of our digital goods, and that's why we are trying to support as many chains as we can, because we want to build the creator economy. We want an artist or an author or whoever to come to us, and if they want to launch a book, eventually we don't want to be the gatekeeper there. Even like just if they choose to launch a book using a DEA, they can do it on any chain that they want. And honestly, that's why we're branching out to all these different chains. So
sweet.
Yeah. So let's talk lending.
But do you want to get into lending? Okay, yeah. So let's do lending. So that's cool, because that's something. So I was kind of like curious about, like, and I know, I guess maybe just to finish that thought, to your point, like of that thing, and to make it sort of explicit, like I think a big part of it is also that more than books preferences, some authors have like their preferences based on what chains either they're familiar with or the community's already involved in or whatever.
Exactly.
And they want to be like, hey, I would like to launch on this one chain or whatever ones you have, or maybe which one will be the lowest fees for me to have to pay or whatever else. And so that's a big part of it, where it's like it's more driven by the authors and the publishers than really books.
That's exactly right. Because to us, it doesn't make any difference. I mean, if you want to launch your book on Ethereum, go for it. And there are certain, like you had just said there, so we have a few authors in the queue who have massive communities on Ethereum. And so their communities all have ETH already, and so they're much more likely to buy the book on Ethereum than to cross chains and go to like Algorand and buy something. And that's not a dig on Algorand at all. That's just where this author happens to have their community. And then other authors, like you said, they're more interested in fees. They're like, I want my book to be really affordable. Well, it doesn't make sense to try to launch your book on Ethereum if someone's going to have to pay $35 in gas just to mint your book, and you're wanting to sell your book for like $3 US, then that doesn't make any sense. So you might be better off going to like Cardano, Algorand, or Poly. And so our goal really is just to give creators options.
Sorry, I promise
absolutely.
we'll talk about lending. Because like we probably at this point I only got like maybe 5-10 minutes left. So I do want to talk about lending because it's interesting. So it's funny how we went from being like an or to an and, but that's okay. So we'll talk about both. So but let's talk through lending, because that was really cool to whiteboard it out, and it's actually something that you and I have been talking about since 6 months before I even applied to work at Book. When I stopped by here on that road trip, so kind of like bring us full circle how we started this conversation. When I stopped by on that road trip, you and I were already kind of brainstorming like what would that look like, and that was in like November of last year or something. And so anyway, tell me a little bit about like your thoughts on lending, and maybe even at the highest level of just like what are the because I know people are gonna have a lot of questions, and obviously I will say that like none of this is yet set in stone. We have to actually build the thing, right, and see how it all kind of comes out. But as of right now, what is your sort of vision for the first iteration of what lending would look like?
Yeah. So honestly, I like to approach everything kind of, I guess maybe it is my marketing minor experience. I try to approach everything from a what sort of business value does this add? And what I see lending as is, and we had kind of talked about this a little bit, it's something that sets us apart from existing like booksellers. So the fact that I can buy a book and then I can lend it to you so you can read it, and then I can recall it at any time. And that's all completely peer-to-peer, which was actually a really good question we got on Twitter. Like, is this going to be a centralized thing, or is this is this peer-to-peer? So this is all completely decentralized, just using smart contracts. So I can buy a book, and then if you have the book, you could either go buy the book if you wanted, or if we're friends and I'm like, hey, I just finished this book, why don't you read it? Then I could, in a completely trustless way, even though you're my friend and I do trust you, but in a completely trustless way, I could loan you my book. You could read the book, and then when you're done, or at any time that I want to, I could recall it. And so at a very base level, that's what our V1 lending protocol is going to be. And then we started nerding out on all the different possibilities of that. There's a ton of different really cool possibilities that I'd love to talk about, or we can just leave those for now.
Let's see. Well, so yeah, I mean, we can talk about like one or two, but actually no. Damn. Okay, you know what? Let's do this. Let's do this again soon.
Yeah.
And how about this? We could have like a deeper conversation, especially once we start building it out.
Yeah.
And it gets closer. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
That'll be fun. Once we get closer to building it out and we like see where it's actually going to be, we can have a deeper conversation on it. Because there's just as like a little teaser. There's a lot of things we talked about in terms of like when you lend it right now in the simplest sense, it'll be just from one person to another. But potentially maybe you could lend it to multiple people. How things that you could manually recall it, or we could set like a timer where at a certain time your loan expires and just goes back, kind of thing. So there's a lot of cool things like that.
Even I think my favorite one so far is the idea of like escrowing funds. So if I'm a university and I have 300 textbooks, then you being a student at the university could actually pay to borrow the book for a certain amount of time, and then at the end of the semester I can recall the money back, or if I recall it back earlier, then you get your money back. Like just a lot of really cool things we can do there.
Yeah, it's super cool. So that'll be fun. We can have like, once it gets clear in terms of what's going to make it to V1 and what we're looking at for V2, it'll be nice to sort of like have another trip around the sun, so to speak, in this conversation, and we can like dig into that, and we'll start on that. But so I'll kind of like leave it to you then for like any like last thoughts about anything about blockchain, book, anything, what like RJ's last thoughts, but and then we'll come back and follow up next time.
All I could say is that, and you actually kind of pointed this out yesterday when we tweeted out a picture of us working on the lending protocol. The community response has been incredible. So just thank you to everyone who has supported us. It means everything. Like when we're working 80 hours a week, just grinding, like with Consensus was a really good example. I haven't slept in like 2 weeks, and just it really keeps us going, knowing that the community believes not only in the project but in the entire vision of decentralized knowledge. Because like I said at the beginning, I'm just some guy behind a keyboard that is blessed enough to get to work on this project and to try to help take like digital ownership of your assets one step forward, and then someone will come pick up the baton from me, and we'll just keep moving it forward together. And so I think more than anything, just this community has been incredible. So just so supportive, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to close out on. And thanks to everybody. Like that was just really cool when that went out. Like I told RJ this morning, I was like, man, I know that we thought it was fun, but I did not expect the kind of positive response that we got just from like just two nerds like scribbling on a whiteboard. So anyway, so thanks to everybody. RJ, thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate you sitting down. Like, I know that like you don't necessarily like prefer to do like some of this stuff, but I'm
so uncomfortable.
Yeah,
this is not my.
But I really like you and I have such good conversations, and I thought it might be fun to kind of like do this or whatever, and so I really appreciate it, and I'd love to do it again sometime soon. Awesome. Let me know. Let us know down below if you have any questions for RJ or specific stuff that you want us to like talk about next time we get together. And if nothing else, we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.